proud to call the meeting to order. Can you please join me in the pledge of allegiance?
Flag's over here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Your roll call, please.
Trustee Benson? Here. Trustee Gunther? Here. Pro Tem Jackson? Here. Trustee Mead?
Present.
Trustee Pelfrey? Here. Trustee Varian?
Here.
President Auer?
Here. Next item on the agenda is public comments. We have the podium here. Anybody wants to make a public comment, they can come to the podium and just go ahead. Go ahead, Don.
Okay, yeah, there, okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Just two items I'd like to address. The Van Buren County Public Health Department is built a new addition onto the Van Buren ISD, and it's going to be 8 particular dentist areas. And one of the problems in the past for some of the people with a lot of disabilities, kids that are in a bed that can't get up to sit there, there's going to be no chair there. They can come in there. They used to have to go to Grand Rapids or Detroit to do this. We'll be able to do that service in Van Buren County to really help these kids. The other thing is, as of July 1st, we'll be paying $3 for phone device per month. And what this will do is going to pay for the updates. There's going to be 6 new antennas throughout the county to improve 911 service. And they have to build a brand new antenna for about $1 million over at the Palisades plant, because it's too close to the nuclear power plant. They got to build a new one. So, but they have $2 million in the service, so it's already going to be paid for. So I think we're going to have a very good service.
Thanks. Any more public comments? Okay, no public comments. I'll move on to the consent agenda. Any additions or deletions to the agenda? Any additions or deletions? No additions or deletions? So what I need is approval of the agenda as presented minutes from the February 1st, 2021 regular meeting, and bills and a total of $136,838.83. Motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda from February 1st and bills.
Trustee Brand, the second.
I'll second that.
Trustee Mead, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Correspondence. A letter from Pastor Coleman.
Yes, so letter reads, greetings Tom team. I wanted to pass on the heartfelt gratitude from the family of Mary Lou Mallory. She passed the other night in the home of Dale Bryant. Their family is connected to the Emmanuel Church, and I will be officiating her homegoing service. Her sister Joan White passed just 5 months ago, so the family's taking this loss tough. They could not remember what the officer's name was that stayed with them through their moment of loss. Their hearts were made glad that he stayed with them and offered his services to them throughout their moment of anguish and the loss of a loved one. I was touched to hear how they saw humanity beyond the badge to help them and to comfort them in their time of need. They admitted they saw the department in a very different light, which is a tribute to your approach to the work in our community. I believe it is imperative that you hear the good things as we always hear when things don't go well. So from a pastor's heart who has been touched by all of you in our work together, it is my constant prayer for your safety and protection in the work that we all will do in our various capacities to make our community a great place to live, play, and to worship together.
That's a nice letter. Thank you.
Yeah, may he, or I guess, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Appreciate our police department, what they do for us, what they do for the community. That's a good example of what they do for us. Second, any comments? Any comments from the council about the letter? Second item on the agenda is presentations from Robert Smith, Vbisd construction program. Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Yep, if you wouldn't mind.
Good evening, everyone. And so, my name is Robert Smith, and I'm the Career Technical Education Director for Van Buren County, from Van Buren ISD. And so, Matt and I were having a conversation last week about a potential partnership for our construction trades program. And just to kind of give you a little bit of background, we have 2 construction trades programs. One is our first year program, or our beginning level program, that we build a house inside of a giant pole barn, which you saw in some of the pictures there. And then our second house, we build off of a subdivision that we own in Lawrence. And so this particular piece is something that we've done with this house we've built through we've done this in partnership with Habitat for Humanity. We've auctioned some off in past years. And then this past 2 years, because of COVID, we've been in a partnership with the Village of Lawton as well, in a house that's going there, or is there now, but it's being finished up right now. And so what this particular partnership would look like would be typically the partner donates the land and then we take care of the rest, essentially. We would be responsible for all the permitting, all of the testing. We'd be responsible for the excavation and all of the inspections. We'd be responsible for building the house at Vbisd, transporting it over, making sure the crane crew is there to put it on the basement, making sure the set crew is there to put everything together, and then we would be, working with the subcontractor to finish things up for the final inspection. And so I provided you some information about what that process looks like, and I won't go through that, item by item, and then as well as some information about the specs on what that home looks like. And you can see from the floor plan, there are a couple different entries to this home and from the exterior. So you have one that comes off of the great room, and then you have one that comes off of the kitchen. So you have the ability to possibly put a nice deck on that front side from there. And I think the picture that you see at the end of the pictures is actually the one that is on the great room side. So you can kind of see how this is done, where it's, the way that we have structured this over the years is that our students work on one half each year. And so they work on that. You can see the first picture there, the left side of the house, they might finish that just in this year, and then next year we'll be finishing off the other side. Once that side is done, it's all wrapped up, ready to go, and then it's shipped out via the movers to the site, and then we go from there. So we tend to think of it as a win-win situation, simply because we're providing property tax values that are coming back into the community, and we're also taking care of all of the sale of the property and all of those types of things, as well as the permits and everything. And we're also providing an opportunity that your Decatur high school students can participate in if they are, choose to be a part of that program as well. So that's about the extent of what I have. Are there any questions?
Do you know, are there any students from Decatur in the program right now?
Currently, there are not this year.
Yeah,
and I attribute a lot of that. Typically, there are several, but our enrollment is down about 200 because of the
COVID
pandemic.
The nice thing about this, the students actually doing the work. That's really nice.
Yeah, and the other part that's nice about it is we have the flexibility because it is a learning experience, so that if we get to a spot where we're writing off some of that cost as a learning activity. And so we have that ability to kind of flex with the market to see where that goes to.
Yeah, but I think one thing, if you don't mind me interjecting, I think one thing that I wanted, I guess, to get across to you guys, we'll talk about it a little later, but I think from our conversations, really the one thing is that the ISD is not looking at this as a money-making endeavor. So the goal would be, to obviously cover the costs and things that go into the project, but I think you said you've used like forsale.com and some other sources where it's not something where you're going to see an inflated price. It's going to be really a very affordable type setup as well. So I think that's one thing that you see with something like this versus, a private developer is there really is an incentive here to kind of derive an effort for income. It's really just to cover the costs that are there and move on to the next project.
And I think that's a really good point, is that number one, we don't want to compete with our private, construction companies as well, because we don't want to be in that market, and we don't want to hurt their earning potential either. At the same time, we're just looking to just provide this training experience, and we could cut back and we could build sheds or we could build other types of things, but it doesn't provide the type of experience that these students will need if they truly want to go out and get a job in a construction trades industry. And so that's why in this particular program, they don't necessarily get to be a part of the excavation and the connection of the lines like they would at the subdivision house, but this really gets them prepped in terms of framing a house, drywalling a house, roofing, soffit, fascia, I mean, electrical, all that stuff that they get to truly be a part of. And we have some really great partnerships with subcontractors around the community that really work with the students and teach them, and that we pay them, but they not only come and provide a plumbing service, but they sit and they actually teach the students, this is how you plumb a house, this is why you do it this way versus that way. So.
Don, you have a question for that? Go ahead.
Okay, Robert, we've met before, you've done a number of these in Lawrence Village, right through that area there, not very far from the school. They've been in really stellar jobs. Now you're breaking out in a different, larger area to do these kind of.
So this is something we've always done. It's
Yes.
just been in different format. When I first arrived there 14 years ago,
Yeah.
we were still doing them with Habitat for Humanity. And then Habitat for Humanity decided they really didn't want to go into the building phases anymore. They were doing more rehabs. So then we started selling them, auctioning them off for cost. And I think we auctioned the first one off for $25,000 as a full house. And then we started getting away from that model because we were getting repeat buyers and we really wanted to kind of spread the wealth. So then we started having ideas of how can we benefit our communities, because we saw the benefit that the subdivision was bringing to the city of Lawrence with the tax value that was going in. With now we have about 9 or 10 houses in that subdivision. And so they were really starting, and so we wanted to reach out and see if there were other communities that really wanted to.
So you're in other townships now.
Absolutely.
It's been a great job because they're stellar jobs because they're very good, great quality. You've done a fantastic job with this.
Thank you.
Any questions from the council? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is Mr. Morris with something to present to us.
Good evening, and I believe you have this printed out already, and your hands, I'll give you a copy of your. Thank you. And those of you that don't know me, I know Mr. Delaware and Mr. Varan here. I've known them for quite some time, and of course went to school with Matt.
Yep.
And of course my neighbor here too. So know quite a few people in the room here, and appreciate the time on the agenda this evening to talk about Market Van Buren. Those who do know me, I did go to school in Decatur, graduated 20 years ago already. Hard to believe it.
Getting there.
It's getting there, yeah. So it's a little hard to believe that already, but time marches on, and I have come back to Van Buren County to lead the Economic Development Organization, and I'm in 4.5 years in, and part of that time we started up one called Market Van Buren, as you have there. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing with it, what we've been doing, and ask you guys at some point here to participate along with some of the other units of government that have been doing it. And this is the first time I've done a presentation live with the mask on, so as I'm trying to breathe, bear with me. So if you look at the second slide here, talk about what is economic development. And that's something that, a lot of people are asking. Yeah.
Where's this coming from? I'm allergic to.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely right. If I get an early morning meeting and, I just do a coughing in the morning, and not COVID, it's not COVID, trust me, it's not. Everyone feels they have to explain it, don't they? But what is economic development? Economic development is the three things. It's people or the talent of a community. You have the community itself, which is a municipality. Then you also have business actually. So those three things. And they work in a symbiotic relationship. And what I mean by symbiotic is that the three have to work together if you're going to have a successful economy, right? You have to have people who work in the businesses. That's the talent side of it, right? Those people want to live in a nice community, the community that you guys have set up. You talked about the police department tonight. We're talking about a home program, education, all these kind of things are what people look for at a good place to live. You guys are trying to provide that. And in turn, you need the tax dollars from the businesses and the payroll from those businesses to support the community and its growth, right? So the three work together, and that's what economic developers do, is we work kind of in that middle area there to make sure we support all three. And that's what we do. just try to kind of level set with you guys as we go forward here, so you know what I'm talking about. Third slide is what is our organization structure? So we are a subsidiary organization of Connexus Group, and I'm a 501c3. I have my own board of directors, and we operate independent of them. Although we do have an agreement with them to help me with a lot of back-end services, and the way that works out is that it allows me not to have to do payroll every day, or once a month, or once a week, whatever payroll runs. I don't even have to worry about it. I just know it goes in my account. That's the nice thing, right? Technology, facilities, all those kind of things that a normal organization president like me would have to do. I don't have to do those things. I outsource it to the parent company for that. So it allows me to spend more time being an economic developer. So that's what the nice beauty behind that structure is, and there's a lot of things like grant writers and other things I have access to as I go along, marketing materials that they help me put this together and make it look nice and pretty. So that's just part of it there. So that's our structure so that we maximize any dollars given to us. Go to a timeline here. You see on the 4th slide, it's a timeline. How did we get started? How did this whole thing get rolling? So back in 2014, the county had a revolving loan fund, still does, as a matter of fact, and the Economic Development Corporation manages it. Mr. Hanson, who is here today, was on the commission then, and what they asked Connexus Group, hey, can you help us market this revolving loan fund, because the state of Michigan, who gives the grant money to us for this project, is going to take it back if we don't use it. We're going to lose it, essentially, what they're saying. So we did it, and we ended up helping them. Got 3 loans issued for 15 jobs created and $700,000 of economic impact. It's pretty successful. And that's when Mr. Hanson, some of the commissioners, said, well, it's been this successful, can we expand the program a little bit and do a little bit more? And we said, sure, we can put on a full-time economic developer, which was me at the time. They hired me to do the work. And have you go out and work with the business community and municipalities. So that's what we started doing. And as we're moving along, 2018, we helped, up to this point, 2 years in, we've helped create 111 jobs, 200 jobs have been retained, and $300,000 of capital issued, and an economic impact of $25 million. Let me explain to you what that means. So economic impact is a combination of jobs created and retained, multiplied by the 4th quartile of lowest wages on average. So it's not like we're trying to average it based off the highest, was the lowest amount. And then we only do it for 1 year. We only take credit for 1 year's worth of jobs there. The other thing is investment. So a business expands and grows. So like Midwest Fasteners, we help that project. We only take credit for the growth in that project. So the way that works, you put it together and it gives you what we estimate to be the economic impact locally for that particular case. Up to that point, so this is working pretty good. We've been 4 years total into the initiative, 2 years me being on the job. It's going pretty well at this point. So we said, why don't we do what a best practice of most communities is? We form an economic development organization that's owned by the community, you and the businesses, and have you guys sit on the board and direct activities. So that's what we did. So we put that together and we created Market Van Buren. That's the way we put it together. And that has led to even more success. It's been a good program we've been working with. It's resulted in, you see in 2020, we'll go through that, 168 jobs being created total, now 427 jobs retained, and a $43.72 million economic impact. Now actually something I can be kind of proud of here is that the businesses we work with across the county are still in business during COVID. I'm pretty excited about that. That's just something that we're going to be celebrating a little bit more as we go on. Some of the businesses have said, well, let's just wait maybe another month or two until things are really fully open, until we make sure they really do stick it out. But most of the businesses we worked with have done well. We've helped get $112,000 directly what we've helped get out to people, and did 10 loans for $200,000. So we've helped altogether 30 small businesses, and all of them are still in business, which is good. I think the estimate was that they said it was about a third of the businesses were going to close, wasn't it? Mr. Hanson, I think it was. A third of the businesses, and I'm pretty proud of where we're at right now with that. Some other points of success I want to show you, because I know you guys probably want to make sure that we're moving along, but I want to make sure you guys understand some of the points of success here that we measure by. We also at the point when we were just getting started, the organization really were only able to bring in one loan at the time, or one grant, to help train for $21,000. That was okay. This is part of what's the Going Pro Talent Fund, the state of Michigan. Competitive program, 83 counties, state of Michigan. Skipping ahead, we helped in 2019, 21 local businesses get $1.2 million to help train their workforce. Now at 83 counties and a $30 million program, I'd say we're doing pretty well. We're punching above our body.
Very good.
Moving forward, this year, this is after COVID and everything, we've done 25 for this year, 875,000. So it goes up and down depending on how they score it out, but 875,000 out of the 83 counties. So feeling pretty good about that. Just recently, most recent thing before I turn the page here, do one more thing, is that Michigan Economic Development Corporation has recognized us as a partner now. So that's good. It's kind of that stamp of approval that, hey, you've kind of grown up now, you've made it here. So they're approving that. So far this year, just kind of give you some more results, let you know that we are still working. Jobs created, 80 jobs created. Jobs retained, 133. Business attraction and starts, 3 of them. And business retention's 10. That's those 10 loans we did here recently. So overall, it's the economic impact of a little over $19 million. So still moving. So what are we gonna do? What do we wanna do? Where are we going as an organization? That's a question some people ask me, okay, if you've had some success, where you continue to go? We have a 7-point plan that if I wake up one day and say, I don't know what I'm gonna do, this is the thing I go look at. Am I still working towards this end, right? We first said, we want to form an economic development organization. Check, we've done that. Create a countywide economic development plan. We got a Vbisd grant a couple of years back, got that. Check, that's off the box. Establish the county land bank is a big thing I want to do. And village manager here sits down there with me. So we can say, check, we've done that too, haven't we, Matt?
Yes, we have.
So we got that established and up and running too. Fourth thing is develop the county industrial sites. So I'm going to flip through, you'll see here just a little bit. We're going to talk on the next slide about the Mbdc Readiness grant we got. And that Mbdc Readiness grant, we can just take a look at that real quick. That's an industrial site that we're developing off the Mattawan exit. The village said, hey, we've got like 65 acres just sitting here doing nothing. We want to get more jobs, we want to grow our tax base, why can't we do something with this? So I talked to the landowner, got permission, we're now doing the studies that you need. When I go to work with site selectors, and site selectors are people that help big corporations find where the next site's gonna be for jobs and investment. So I have to have my homework done when I present them with the documents, tell them, here's what we got on site, here's what the water looks like, and contaminants, and taxes, and all these kind of things. Yeah, they want all those answers, right? So altogether it's 85 acres when you count the 2 lots up front also. But there's a location quotient of 16 here for life sciences. Life sciences, Charles River's right across the street from there. A lot of you have been there and seen the place or know of it. But you think Stryker and Zoetis and Pfizer and all these other companies that are around, they're on the life sciences. So we have a cluster, industry cluster that we didn't realize that we can help market the site for maybe potential more jobs like it. So that's something we're working in, and I end up getting with my team of grant writers, we got a $100,000 grant to help for this site get those studies done. So number 4 is in process, because this is never done for me, by the way. Number 4 is never done, because there's always going to be another industrial site I want to look at. Matter of fact, AT contacted me about some of the industrial sites that you guys have. Hey, could this actually work? So eventually we want to work with Village of Decatur and identifying some more sites with Matt. Augment the current revolving loan fund. We've set up what we call a strategic fund now. Mr. Hanson approved that along with the other rest of the commissioners. And in that strategic fund is what we're going to do is it's a lot of complicated parts of this, but all you really want to know is this, is that there's going to be money in it that's going to be free of a lot of the government regulations that the state of Michigan and federal government have placed on our current revolving loan fund. We're going to clean it up, make it easy so that when your businesses here in town need a loan, they fill out an application like we would with the bank, and they can get an answer quick. Right now, we can't do that because of the government bureaucracy tied to the current program. But we're cleaning it up and working toward that end. Number 6 is the countywide high-speed interconnectivity. If you most of you live, or all of you live in the village, so I'm sure you have Comcast internet. You get outside the village in some cases where you don't have that actually. Unless you have Midwest, some places that have Midwest, but
Unfortunately not.
it can be really a struggle. This is what we have to solve this. This is equivalent to the 1936 Rural Electrification Act, when they brought electric out from the cities out to the country. And I think it's just as equivalent of that. This has become a necessity, and we've seen in the last year of the pandemic, that you obviously need high-speed internet. So I think we have to solve that. I have a task force stood up for this, of Midwest Energy's president, we got Bloomingdale Communications president on, we have 2 township supervisors on that one. What else we have on that one? We have the ISD's tech director, Damien. So, and then we also have the county, Chuck's on it too. Then Mr. Godfrey representing the commissioners.
He's chairman of their board.
He is, he's on Bloomingdale too. So we got a broad group of people who are what I call leaders on this one, that we're not gonna sit around and just talk. And so I purposely did not call it a committee. Committees, a lot of times, I sometimes like to talk. This is what I wanna be a task force. We're doing something. We're gonna get it done this time, so that's what we're doing there. And the last one is a county business connect program. And let's just say Ms. Belfry has a business and Ms. Betts has a business, and you guys are selling a product and you're making a product and you need it. Or you're selling a product and you're making a product where you need what she has, but you don't know she exists. And I've done that where I went to one business, Quality Assured Plastics in Lawrence, and they're making plastic molded parts, and I go into Getman and Bangor, and they're buying plastic molded parts, and they don't know about each other. So I make the introduction between the CEOs of the companies, and hopefully start fostering a connection. That's actually a true story. But it'd be the same thing between you 2 sitting here, 2 people apart, you don't even know you could actually work together on a project. That's what we hope to also be fostering with that. You saw the Mbdc website Readiness. Here's a list of our current investors. We use the word investor, and not in the terms that you get a dividend or something like that. You get a return on investment through taxes, economic prosperity, someone who you can turn to and you need help with certain things. That's an investment in a project or tool. And that's what we say with this, is that you guys would be an investor in this. So we have approximately 30 investors right now. Flipping through here, and we have one here has got the pluses and equals. What is our goal, right? Our goal is this: the county seated us with $125,000. Very generous of the county to do that and start us out with that. Municipalities, what we're looking for are the 18 municipalities, or 18 townships and 11 cities and villages, so 29 municipalities. So you guys are one of 29 in Van Buren County. What we're looking for out of them altogether is $75,000, all from the 29. And I'll show you the formula in a second that we've developed, that we've made it equitable and fair based off your taxable value and population. So that no one says, okay, we're all gonna pay the same. Well, how in the world is Bloomingdale and South Haven gonna pay the same? It's totally 2 different groups, so you gotta make it equitable and fair. And then the other thing is the private sector, we target $100,000 from the private sector for a total goal of $300,000. That's our goal, $300,000. They can run through everything on that. Flipping the page to municipal investment structure, see the little star indicates which units of government are already investing in economic development, and we're asking the village of Decatur to join them at what we call the amount of the composite rate of $1,164.61. And the way we do it, you can just see real quick, taxable value per capita, you add it together, divided by 2. It's worked out a lot of the hills and valleys between people that have a high taxable value or high population, and maybe they have low taxable value and offsets. And our board came up with this one. This is the board of, we had some people from the municipalities help us with that one. Mm-hmm. So that's the amount that we would be asking you guys, if you're so generous to approve tonight, and we'd ask that on a 3-year structure. That's because we're trying to do a 3-year budget. I mean, you guys, so you understand how that works.
So this is an annual?
Annual contribution. Yes, ma'am.
Now, they do, one thing we'll probably have to do, I don't know, we didn't actually have a a resolution or anything on the agenda, but I think we could probably add it for next month. I'm assuming there's probably normally a resolution that goes along with this.
I would think so.
So what we'll probably do is, you know, obviously you guys have had a chance to hear about it. The idea is we'll come back next month. I'll have a resolution ready that would, you know, for this composite total. And then you guys could then decide, you know, do we want to participate here or not?
Is that okay with you?
Does that work?
Yeah, that works great. Any questions before, you
Now,
know?
you still gotta go to all these other municipalities, you still want to go to all the meetings?
Yes, sir. Yep, absolutely. Yep. Mr. Mead, I've got to get to every one. All 29 of them. But this is my hometown. I said I got to get on there eventually and get on the agenda and get here. But yeah, this is all of them. I'm slowly working through them because you guys meet once a month or twice a month.
Once a month.
Once a month. Some meet twice. Some villages do.
Well, it gets hard because you got some that meet at the same time as others.
And you know, and then you know, sometimes you come back and you have to come back the next month and get it again. So,
Yep.
which is fine. But
So of the 10 businesses that we retained,
yeah,
what industry are those in? Are they mixed or?
mostly hospitality. Mostly hospitality. You know, your restaurants, cafes, places like that. I think we would have one greenhouse too. So we have one of those.
Makes sense, and I think naturally those would probably be the ones most impacted
They were at the
with
time.
COVID.
They were. We still have, actually, we're still doing, we have a few others that have kind of come out of the winter shutdowns and said, man, we could really use some cash right now. So we're gonna do a few more. So the nice thing with this was that at the time, the state wasn't thinking about retention necessarily. And I really pushed them hard on saying, we need to change the program so that we can do retention, not just job creation. I like job creation, it's the big sexy thing. You know, how many jobs you created? Well, I'm more interested in getting through this and keeping these businesses alive. So we cut it at 2% interest rate also. Got the board to do that. Interest only in the first year. And only job retention, only one job you have to save. So we really worked hard to make this business-friendly program that we didn't make a whole lot of money off them as a
Yeah.
county.
But it worked, was effective, it was very effective.
And so far, like I said, fingers crossed, we're still there.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the countywide high-speed internet connectivity? What are you doing basically? Are you gonna bring some more companies in, or is that how the plan is now you only have one company, controls everything? Are you guys gonna have some,
Yeah.
invite more companies into the area? Or what?
Absolutely. So in Van Buren County, you can kind of say from the top of Van Buren County coming down, Bloomingdale Communication controls a lot of that. And from Cass County coming up, we have Midwest Energy Communications does quite a bit, right? In between some of the cities and villages, you have Comcast that works in some of the more densely populated places. If there's a couple other smaller companies, so I think in total we have like 6 companies that serve different parts of the county. It's all broken up really odd. Like, the big issue is this, is that the census tracts are the big issue with the FCC. The FCC says this, if you serve one resident inside a census tract, and census tracts are sort of like your zip code, you got this kind of breaks up funny the zip codes do. It's sort of like what a census tract does, but it's not quite the same, laid out the same. And if, let's just say, if we serve one address here, and you're over here, tough luck, because we're not gonna extend it over there, but the maps show you're served, man. But you're really,
If one is in the area, they say the area is served, that's what the complication is.
So you go online, you hear people, oh yeah, I looked it up and I got 3 providers. None of the 3 can serve me. Or for $7,000, we can extend it 1,500 feet to your house. That's just money.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah, it's just money.
That's my house, actually.
Yeah,
It's probably it too, isn't it?
Yeah, they're right up the street, but,
one of the things that Fred Upton had, Congressman Upton, is said that if you have, because all of the townships have public taxes on all of the electric poles. Now, they said, and Midwest Energy and Cass runs all their high-speed internet right along the poles. And it's a mile and a half my house. It would cost me $60,000 to have it come, because I got I&M. So he's got a plan out there. If whoever has an electric pole can put the internet on it. But it's in Congress, it's really stumbling along, because if everybody has electricity, but they don't have high-speed internet, if they could, and the township's already paid the property taxes, from these people, so why not say, put the, internet right on the electric poles?
That's exactly
Is
it.
that what you guys gonna resolve these issues? Is that what you're trying to do?
So, it's in steps here. So the first step is we correct the maps. The maps have to get corrected. And once we correct the maps and we actually have an accurate, actually show accurately where it is, then we can apply for federal grant dollars. But right now, federal grants, that you go to USDA or other places, they'll say, no, according to map, you're served.
Yep.
Nothing, you
One
don't need any
person.
money.
One person's there.
That's it, yeah, you're served. And we're like, no, we know they're not served. Well, correct the map. So that's what we gotta do first. And we actually got a grant right now that we're working on. We've been told we're probably gonna get it. And that's gonna help us work with a GIS guy to get the map actually done and complete. And then we have to do a feasibility study, which that's another additional step. It tells us how much money it's gonna cost to actually complete the last mile. And then after that, we can apply for the money and start piecing it together.
I think, if you don't mind me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think part of the challenge is that, when you look at, even the village, or when you start getting into bigger municipalities, the advantage there is scale. You, in the village, you might have 800 homes. But if you drive out, like, towards my house, for example, and you
Yeah.
go out, Prairie Ron, that area out there, County Road, 669, you might have a density where you've got a half a mile between houses. So the same mile of fiber doesn't provide you as a business the same benefits. So part of this is trying to work with, an organization like Market Van Buren, Fred Upton's office, the state, trying to come together and say, well, what incentives can we try to find where it makes it more economical for somebody like a Midwest or something like that to complete that 1,000 feet so that this whole area is actually covered instead of having these little gaps like they have now.
Yeah, just a few years ago, I remember they did fiber optics around the village,
Yep.
What happened to those, lines, they dug, you guys remember that?
Yep.
So what happened to those?
See, now that's the thing, it's like, see, in the village, you would have those options, so, right now, actually, I talked to Comcast not long ago, and if you're in the village in a lot of places, if you wanted fiber connections, you could. Those are here in the village, but if you go 150 feet outside the village limits, you might be out of luck, or they might say, well, we can extend it, but it's gonna cost you $35,000. That's where it starts being really prohibitive for rural development.
People, I'm talking about the village now, since, do people in the village know that if they want a fiber optics, they could?
Yes. I mean, there's extra costs. Comcast is actually, there are a few businesses that have the fiber service, and I think actually the school is working on a project right now to run fiber from out near Special Lake to their location, which probably might open the avenue for, other residential uses of that potentially too.
Yeah,
But it's definitely a problem that needs fixing.
it's a lot more complicated than I ever thought it was, that was for sure, when I started digging into the issue and trying to figure it out.
Definitely.
Is there any questions for Zach? Anybody?
The sooner the better, especially since we have all these kids trying to learn from home.
Oh, man.
Absolutely.
We appreciate it, Zach, thank you very much.
Yeah, right, thank you for your time and allowing me on time on the agenda.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, next item on the agenda is officer reports. Any questions about any of the officers' reports from the council? Questions? Do you have anything new, Matt, besides the work please?
I might have a thing or two to add. One thing I guess I'll highlight, just because, when you look through the packet, there is two things included. One is our cash summary that was for the month of February. And then one thing we did this year, and I think we're going to start trying to do this annually. Now, keep in mind, there are more than likely some electric bills, gas bills, things like that, that probably will still count towards the previous fiscal year that we just haven't been billed yet. There are instances where a lot of services get billed in arrears. So that's where Kim actually comes in and has to, when we get to this time of year, look and go, okay, is this next year's bill? Is this from fiscal year 21? So it'll change a little, but we actually ran a summary report that started March 1st of 2020 through February 28th of 2021. So you kind of see the beginning balances across the different funds. debits, credits, and then what the ending balance is. So right now, looking at the general fund, you can see we had 537,000 that started in March 1st of 2020, and we're at 568,000 right now at the end of February 20, or at the end of the month. Now that'll change a little bit, but it gives you kind of a rough approximation of, how did we do, what did we spend, et cetera, on a whole year basis. So obviously the budget's a big factor here too, but it's a really good reference just to see where are we at. So I figured I'd touch on that real quick. For me, let me see. Obviously with COVID, we're still doing everything we can to try to keep everybody safe, but our office is obviously open like we have been. I think we talked about that last month. We continue to keep following the same safety protocols we need, so temperature checks, masks when you're in the office. Obviously with visitors, we encourage everybody to wear a mask if they're coming into the village office, or if they don't, hey, go grab your mask, or here's one. We have the guards up at the PD as well as the water office here to make sure we're taking care of that. And then we're still working on vaccines. Our police department, I believe, has gotten both vaccines, or both rounds of the vaccine, so they're all set. We have one in our office, and I think a couple DPW guys that have gotten it so far. So slowly but surely, we're getting there to where the staff is getting vaccinated. Some of us have to wait a little bit longer, me being one of them, until we get to that cohort where we get to be vaccinated. But we're slowly but surely getting there. And then we did make a little bit of a change with ServPro. We were having them clean bi-weekly. With some of the data that we're seeing, and I think, with a year now of the staff getting used to the safety protocols and what we need to do, we've actually stepped that back a little bit. So our staff internally is doing a little bit more of the actual cleaning work. And then we've had ServPro come out once a month. So a good example was they came out last week in advance of the meeting today so that we could do a real thorough cleaning of everything. We'll probably do one more and then kind of evaluate at that point, where are we and do we want to keep doing that. Mickey was not able to make it tonight, but he did want me to let you guys know that MDOT has announced a new funding round for Category B funding. That provides grants, I think, up to $250,000. And it would cover 50% of a road project. So if you were doing a project that was, $500,000, you could reach that maximum of $250,000. I checked. I thought maybe we could combine that with what we're doing with USDA. Unfortunately, I think with the timeline, this particular round won't work because when they want this completed, it doesn't quite line up with where we're going to be with our water and sewer projects through USDA. But Mickey and I are looking right now to figure out, do we look at what our road projects were for this year? Do we pick another project, whether it's Beer Street, George Street, something like that, where we really don't have, say, federal funding available, but, could something like this work? So the application date is, I think, due by June 1st. So sometime, I don't know if it'll be next month or May, but there's a process involved where we have to pass a resolution of support from the village council for a particular project, and then outline the costs, estimates, things like that. So we'll be working with Mickey on that. We've also been working on the USDA funding application and water reliability study. We're pretty close there. Jimmy and I just gave quite a bit of documentation to them to hopefully get us to the point where we're getting close to across the finish line there. With Prairie Ronde, we are going to be doing a pretty significant reconstruction there as part of our Rural Task Force funding. With that, one of the things they're proposing is widening the road. We have a couple roads in the village where when you look at the right-of-way, the road is not exactly centered in the right-of-way, so you might have it kind of shaded one way or the other, which can create problems with, if you've got utilities on each side, things like that. It can create some challenges down the line. So the idea with Prairie Ronde, I think they've done this once about 8, 9, 10 years ago where they did some work and shifted it a little. We're going to try and shift it a little more. And then they're going to look at adding some swales and a few other drainage issues to try to improve that area also. With the changes, we're going to be having an informational meeting that we'll bring so the community will be able to come out and take a look at what we're proposing. For anybody that lives in that area, be able to ask questions and say, well, how are you planning to deal with this? A good example of that is there are a few fences in that area where they are very close to where the projected right-of-way for us would be. With the curb lines and things. So one thing we may be able to do with part of the funding we get through the Rural Task Force is actually pay for the cost to move a fence, 4 feet to be able to accommodate that. So that way we're not inconveniencing our homeowners in the area by saying, well, hey, you gotta knock that fence down and move it. This actually would allow us to say, hey, can we get your permission to do the work on your behalf? So that's one thing we're hoping for there. There was a question on rental inspections last month. I said that I would look into that and figure out where we are, so I'll give a brief update on that as well. I talked to Safe Built, said that, hey, where do we stand on the whole process? What can we do to get to a point where we have everything ready to go? I know that they do perform some services for other communities in the area as well, and said, I don't really like waiting. If you guys are able to come in and start building inspections, mechanical inspections, rental inspections, why don't we get started on that now? And then if we're still waiting on plumbing and electrical, we can fill those in later. So that's actually the plan right now. I think in about 7 to 10 business days, we're going to be transitioning. We're working with the state inspectors now to having building and mechanical permitting done through our office with partners with Safe Built. And then rental inspections are scheduled to start around the beginning to middle of April. And then we will look to have, I believe the Construction Code Commission meeting is scheduled for April 16th. That's where we're going to ask for permission to take control of plumbing and electrical inspections for the village. And then we would then roll that into that same program. So when we're done, it should be around the 1st of May, all of our permitting will be handled through one entity. So that streamlines the process for people that are doing any sort of building or construction. And then rental inspections obviously will be a key component of that too. The only thing that may come up, and as we look into this, we'll discuss this with you guys, is originally the idea was for rental licenses. Of course, the idea there is that covers the cost of rental inspections. Since we hadn't completed those, we haven't assessed any license fees yet. Obviously, we're going to be doing that as we get to rental inspections. So we may look to change the timing. I think right now it's scheduled for January 1st. Is when those license fees become due. I'm not a huge fan of necessarily shortening a 1-year license to a modified schedule, so it might be easy enough to just revise that and say, okay, every June 1st, maybe we extend it by a month or two and say, starting in 2022, June 1st is when it's due, and then that way we're on a yearly schedule. I think what we're going to try to do is talk to Safe Built and say, when do you like to do these inspections? And try to come up with a plan where it fits in their schedule as well. And then ideally it gives our landlords at least a year for that current license to be active, rather than saying, well, we need you to pay $125 now, and then actually come December again, we're going to have you pay again. I'm a little leery of doing that, so I'll work with you guys to figure out a solution for that.
Okay, before we go next item, if anybody wants to leave, that's okay. You could stay, you're welcome to stay, but it's up to you. Yeah.
Yes, we won't take offense to it.
I'm not leaving.
Sorry, Jimmy, you gotta stay.
Out of here.
So the next item on the agenda, unfinished business, is Midwest Festival 2021.
Yeah, so last month, I believe it was John Goodrich, I think was his name. He had come in on behalf of Kevin and talked about the Final Gravity is looking to hold a smaller, kind of modified version of Midwest Festival for this year. Obviously, it was on hiatus last year with being in the heart of a pandemic. The hope is that as spring and summer comes, that we're going to be making a significant headway on vaccinations and looking at the stats through the state, that there may be further easings of some of the restrictions to where events like this may be able to actually be held. Obviously, there could be restrictions in place, so maybe masks or something that's required if you're going to be in there in some way. I don't know how you do that with beverages and things, but I'm sure there's probably, that's something they would be responsible for handling. Kind of what they were seeking now is just a preliminary approval to hold the festival on the condition that the event would comply with any applicable MDHSS rules, regulations, and recommendations that may be in place. And I think, they were pretty clear last month that if something comes up where they're not allowed to hold it, they would be able to cancel it. That was the idea behind getting, our local vendors, local bands, et cetera, involved, is that if something comes and they have to pump the brakes, they're not spending a significant amount of money to get some national headliner band in here to say, well, we're going to cancel. Okay, well, you still owe us $10,000 or something. So, they are planning to try to be able to be a little bit nimble with this if they need to. And then we would actually formalize a resolution for the road closures and everything for the event as we get a little bit closer. I think it makes more sense to wait. We only need 30 days, with MDOT really to be able to coordinate any of that. So we'll wait, see how everything is, and then if it looks like everything's set to go, we could then pass a resolution to authorize the closure of the streets, probably July, maybe August, I guess, depending on where we're at.
They don't have an actual date.
I think it was August, was it 18th?
It was like the last week.
Yeah, I think or maybe it's the 20-something. I think it's the third Saturday in August, I think is what they were looking at.
Okay.
And it would just be the North Phelps area for this one. They wouldn't be doing both sides of the street like they did last year. And I think from talking with Kevin, they would have a much greater capacity restriction. In particular as well, if there's anything required through the state as to how you can do outdoor events, they would have all of that in place as well.
I think it was the 21st.
21st, yeah, I think you're right. I think it was the 21st.
Okay, there is no questions. I need a motion to authorize preliminary approval of Midwest Festival 2021, provided that all applicable Michigan Department of Health and Human Services rules, regulation, and recommendation as follows. I'll follow it, sorry. Need a motion. We could wait for Mr. Brand too.
I can make the motion to
Trustee Jackson, any second?
authorize the preliminary approval.
Okay, Trustee Humphrey, so maybe I'll wait for
I need to set up a little speaker here where we can play some music.
Hold music.
Thanks, gentlemen, for coming.
Chair of the Antwerp Township Planning Commission, and I tell people that too, and I really mean it when I tell them that too, so I assume you guys do too.
Yes.
You don't have to stick around the whole meeting.
Don Perez, yeah.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Mr. Hanson?
I'll only be here.
Good idea.
Staying out with the crowd.
You'll get that.
I know, it's all like grandma, but the kids did it.
Looks like I may have overestimated the potential for visitors. I guess we could have spread this way out.
We all did, yeah.
Oh well, at least we were ready.
I thought everybody would be excited to come to the first meeting.
I know, right? No more having to look at a packet online and scroll around and watch, and I hope that Matt scrolls to the right page at the right time.
It's hard to do.
I could comment right now on the construction program. My son did 2 years in that program, and me and my wife went to a visitation at the house they built in Mars. Beautiful home.
Mhm.
They did a really good job. I'd be 100% behind it.
Yeah, we worked with them very closely when I was in Lawrence.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Need for the Midwest Festival. Trustee Jackson made the motion, and Trustee Pelkey seconded the motion. So I want to say, for all in favor, please say aye for the Midwest Festival.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, motion carries. Next item on the agenda is new business. 100 West Bronson Vbisd program.
Yes, so I won't reiterate everything that we already just talked, that Robert did a good job of explaining. Basically, this is going to be restricted to what can the village do with the program that came up. So, Zach actually connected me with Robert. We talked about this. And so we went to look at our parcels and said, does the village have anything that would work? And I had remembered that I thought we had a parcel down on Bronson Street where we really hadn't had a plan for it. And, maybe this would be an option. I said, it's in a residential area. There was talk, I think, when I reached out to a couple of my predecessors, somebody had mentioned, well, we thought maybe a park there at some point, but it never really came to fruition. So I said, well, maybe this would be a great option. So 100 West Bronson, as you drive down Bronson, I guess I'll try to give maybe I should have put a map in here, but basically when you get to where Dole is on your right-hand side there, as you're traversing Bronson from George Street, Dole's on the corner. There's a vacant lot right there across from Dole. This particular lot actually has frontage on Bronson Street, which is kind of an angled road in that area, so it's a bit of an odd entrance there. Or what probably would be more likely here is the frontage on Champion Street. That Champion's pretty straight across that lot, and it's actually a pretty deep lot. One thing that we could maybe look at, I'd have to work with the ISD to see if this would work and with Shalice, but with that lot size, it might be possible where we could split that lot, work with Shalice to do a land division and offer part of that for a program like this and then retain the other part either for future development or maybe another home that we could see in that area as well, and have one here that's on the Champion side and one here that's on the Bronson side. Like Robert said, I think, one of the cool things is that if we have students that are in the program, being able to build a house, but say that like that house, I built that one. Like that's kind of a cool thing if you can do that in your own hometown. So I think there's a lot of possible good that comes from this. One of the big items, obviously everything isn't about tax base, but for any parcel that the village owns, we don't earn any tax revenues from that. So it's really just kind of sitting there available for use, but it's not doing anything. It's not a home, it's not a business, it's not serving a purpose for public works. So this is a great example where something like this actually puts that back to a productive use. In this example, would open up a brand new home for a potential family to move into. And then the benefit to the village, obviously, is the tax revenues, and those extend out, into perpetuity, essentially, as long as there's a home there. So the one downside, obviously, is that with a donation of a parcel, you're not getting any revenues on the sale part of it. But I think when you look at the long-term benefits and you look at the goal of the ISD, and then the fact that with it they're really not trying to generate a revenue out of it, the goal is to try to just recover their costs, the chances are probably better that the home that is built ends up selling for a lower price than what you might see from a private developer potentially. And it's not like we're planning to build 10 of these around here at the moment. I mean, this is kind of a trial of the program, and I think it would actually be really helpful.
I think the village owns more lots than the rest. There's one in Pine Street, I think next to, when John Benson lives. I think there's a vacant lot there, if I'm not mistaken. There's one there. Kim, do you have a lot next to your house too?
Mm-hmm.
There's one next to.
But somebody does own that.
Oh, that somebody does own
And
it?
they bought it off the auction.
Okay.
Yeah, there's been a few lots that came up, but in some instances,
Just something in mind.
if we haven't had a public purpose, we didn't decide to to retain that parcel. For us, in some respects, it does make sense that if there's a vacant parcel there, if we don't have an intended use for it, to let it get sold and developed into something productive. So I believe that's what happened there. I don't know if they probably haven't built anything yet.
The one next to Kim's house?
I think so. Yeah, I don't believe we own that. I think that.
No, I'm just saying. I'm just asking.
Yeah.
The one.
Yeah, essentially.
At the Brooklyn Street, I think there's. Boulevard. There's one there.
Right.
I can look into that.
Because we tried to sell it a few years ago and nobody bought it, maybe 3-4 years ago. But just curiosity, I'm not saying.
No, and that's the thing is that it doesn't necessarily have to be.
If that's successful, you
that
always
part.
do another one.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying is if this does work and it actually plays a big benefit, there probably are other opportunities. Or whenever tax reversions come up from the county, the village always retains the right of first refusal. So if it doesn't sell at an auction, the village, I take that back. If they don't pay for their taxes and don't get caught up, the village has that right, I think, before it goes to auction, to be able to say, we want this parcel. We have a use for it. A lot of the time when you look back over the last 5 or 6 years, we haven't done much of that. But if a program like this works, and then we're just essentially donating that parcel for development, we're not earning any money on it, but it is getting that same sort of development prospect. So there's an opportunity there for us to change the way we do that too. I think this is a great way to kind of test the waters.
Any questions from the council?
The one on Eggy Bergen was actually a prospect.
Okay, okay.
Address. Alan Griffith, actually, we sold it to him.
Okay,
Okay.
okay. I know it was for sale of you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. I remember, I think that was a closed bid one, if I remember.
Okay.
I thought so.
I don't remember. I was just.
No, and if you guys are okay with it, you know, what we could probably look to do, and like I said, I'm not sure if the parcel could be split. That would probably be my preference if it was possible. If we can get enough of a front yard and backyard to make it work and then still keep part of that for another development, I think that would be a good thing to do. So we could look to authorize the donation of that parcel, but, you know, maybe have it contingent upon a parcel split if that is possible.
Yeah, I was just kind of looking at it on the map, and I'm not sure on that one side because it's kind of narrower. So
Yeah, you know, that's the thing is, I don't know if we can get it quite, you know, Shalice would be a good one for that. I hadn't, you know, it was just through kind of talking about it recently. But maybe that's an option. Maybe we could look at
two
that.
houses in there.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I think even if we couldn't split it, I still think there'd be a tangible benefit. But if we could, that would be a helpful thing too. So I think one thing we could look at is, like I said, to authorize it if we could do the split. But if not, we would still have that
I
approval.
think this is a good program. You know.
Just to throw that out there about splitting it. I'm not saying just because but water on Champion Street would be really simple. Water on Bronson Street would be cutting a hole in the road and going under the road. And just, you know,
I think the ISD would have to pay for that, though.
well, I'm just letting you know, if you split it in half, and I don't think you have your setbacks distance.
That's the key, is can we meet the setbacks? And that's what we would look to do is make sure that setback requirements could be met before we did that. Because I don't want to split a parcel and then have a piece left that you can't do anything with.
Any questions? If there's no questions, maybe someone make a motion to authorize the donation of 100 West Bronson Street. Do you want to split it or no? Do you think it could be split, Matt, or no?
It's hard to say. I don't know.
How about if we make the motion to authorize the donation of 100 West Bronson Street as is, if it cannot be split
Okay.
for the construction of a new home?
You want to do a motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you read that for me again, Matt, please?
Yes.
As is.
Move to authorize the donation of 100 West Bronson Street, as is if it cannot be split, to the Vbisd for the construction of a new home through the construction trades program.
Okay. Trustee Jack.
I'll second that.
Trustee Mead, okay, roll call, please.
Trustee Benson?
Yes.
Trustee Gunther?
Yes.
Pro Tem Jackson?
Yes.
Trustee Mead?
Yes.
Trustee Pelfrey?
Yes.
Trustee Varian?
Yes.
President Howard?
Yes. All in favor, motion carries. The next item on the agenda is 415 West Delaware CMF overlay.
Yeah, so 413 West Delaware is, if you drive down there, it's on the way as you're going out towards McDonald's. It's the old laundromat that's there. At one point, there was a sign that they were under renovation, and I think it's still there, but renovation never came to fruition. They ended up selling the parcel. The gentleman that bought it called the village and said, you know, hey, I did purchase this and looking at options, and they were interested in looking at a MRTMA facility, probably a micro business. With that, we had not included that parcel on the original overlay. So, you know, I went through and told them that, well, we'd have to make an amendment first. So we held a meeting of the Planning Commission, discussed what we were looking at here, and of course you can see the map there is attached as well. I kind of put a highlight around where that parcel is so you can see it. It is actually right across the street from another parcel that is in the overlay, so yeah, at this point it was really probably just an oversight, but that is zoned industrial. Obviously it was a business before this point, so there's nothing that would necessarily preclude it from being included. So The Planning Commission took a look at it, held a discussion on the matter, and decided that they were going to recommend to the Village Council that the overlay be amended to include that property. Obviously, the decision rests with the Village Council as to whether that amendment carries. Looking at the property, I really don't see anything necessarily that serves as an impediment to doing this. Again, when you consider there's a parcel right across the street that's already included, I don't think it substantially changes anything in that general area. And I think obviously the big benefit is that you're looking at taking a building that's completely run down, that has no real fundamental use at this point, and either a new building being constructed or a significant rehab on the structure that's there. So that gets the property back to a productive use. And I think actually, obviously there's tax benefits down the line for that, but important in particular, it takes a building that's basically derelict and puts some sort of an actual functional use there.
Any questions from the council? If there's a question, I need a motion to approve the CMF overlay amendment as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve the CMF overlay as amended.
Trustee Guerrero, need a second?
I'll second.
Trustee Pelfrey, can we have a roll call, please?
Yep, trustee Benson,
Yes.
trustee Gunther,
Yes.
Pro Tem Jackson,
Yes.
trustee Mead,
Yes.
trustee Pelfrey,
Yes.
trustee Varian,
Yes.
President Howard.
Yes. All in favor, motion carries. The next item on the agenda is final fiscal year 2021 budget amendment.
Yeah, so we did some budget amendments at the February meeting. At that point, I mentioned that, we'll keep a close eye on things as we go into the last month of the year and see, is there any changes that come up or we would need to do a final adjustment. There's a couple things, I guess, that go into this. One of the big ones, I guess, would be is that, or to kind of, I guess, before we get into this, is we did have funding that came in from the state to refund or to reimburse payroll expenses for the police department, as well as COVID expenses the village incurred. So things like our hand sanitizer stations, cleanings, etc. So that obviously wouldn't have been included in the budget originally. So that's part of when you look at that surplus fund balance that we had that I was talking about. That's part of where that comes from, is those were revenues we hadn't actually anticipated. By the same token, one of the big items that we're kind of trying to make adjustments here for was that there were a couple hazard pay premiums that were paid out to the police department in particular. I think there was actually 3 of those, and then to our other staffing as well. Most of the departments were pretty well equipped to be able to absorb those costs without having a major change that was there. And in fact, the biggest difference here is that with the clerk and treasurer and the village manager, our salaries are allocated across various funds based on how much work we do in that particular area. So in some respects, with major roads, local roads, sewer and water, those percentages are lower in those areas than they are for the general fund. So we had a lot less wiggle room there. So some of these adjustments you'll see, like with major roads, for example, the salary, we're talking a $500 adjustment for one of those, the clerk's salary, $275, so it's not huge amounts. And these again are offset by the income that we had from the payroll reimbursement from COVID as well. With the police department, one of the other things that comes up there is police have options to where with some of their vacation time, if they aren't able to use it, they are able to cash some of that time out. We didn't see a big influx of that last year, but the village owes that vacation pay whenever they might use it. With this year, we had a couple officers that had some significant time built up that used that time off, so it ended up resulting in our vacation pay account being higher than what we had initially projected. I think we've accounted for that for next year, to where we looked at not only what vacation somebody is accruing on the year, but also what are their existing balances, so that if something like this were to happen, we've already planned it out. So that's one adjustment that we had there. Now, what we tried to do, in some cases, there's only one instance where we couldn't do this, was that we looked at the general fund, for example. We said, okay, what accounts do we need to make an adjustment for? So police salary, vacation pay are all in the police department. And we said, okay, is there any other departments where we can offset this change? So a good example would be DPW. We saw an increase in DPW costs for water and sewer this year, But the general DPW department saw a reduction. So when we looked, we said, well, there's no way we're gonna get to, now that payroll's done, we're not gonna get to that total, so can we offset these budget amendments somewhere else, reducing a budget of some other, fund or department. So you'll see with the general fund, there's an increase in the police salary and vacation pay accounts, but reductions in general DPW salaries and then community projects and capital outlay for parks and recreation. Major roads, similar premise, where you have a department, basically the administration department, has some adjustments, and then we did have some snow and ice removal adjustments that had to be made. Obviously with the extreme cold and the way that snow fell from early February, we used a little bit more equipment. Part of that probably is with the addition of another public works staff member full-time. We have more capability to use more pieces of equipment on a regular basis, so we had a little bit of an adjustment for equipment rental and then for materials, so salt. But that was offset by a reduction in the capital outlay account. Local roads, similar premise. We had the manager and clerk salary adjustments there and then reduced the capital outlay amount since that ended up being lower. Business loan fund, that actually just comes from the fact that we added in Cooper's costs. We had not allocated those the right way and realized that when we did that, we were under budget on legal fees, but the audit fees were actually over. So we're proposing an adjustment here to audit, and then we did still have contingency funding that was budgeted that was left over. So this would be a reduction of $114 in contingency and an increase in the audit fund. For sewer, again, similar premise with the manager and the clerk salaries, offset by a reduction in capital outlay. The water fund is the one example where there isn't another department where we can pull from. So we had increased salaries in the water fund. There's a couple reasons for this. Obviously, we've done a little more work in water than we had budgeted. We used kind of a 3-year rolling average to kind of determine what do we think we're going to see. So we basically find a percentage, look at the total payroll for public works and say, here's what we guess we're going to see. In this case, we had a few more water projects and things that came up where we hadn't necessarily anticipated all of that in advance, so that part of that comes from that. And then with COVID, some of the schedule kind of that we had to do with the public works, or we were doing kind of alternating schedules, when they were on call, that was coming out of your water and sewer funds instead of general DPW funds. So that was a cost where in some years that might have been allocated more to general DPW, but for this purposes of this, it ended up being in the water fund. So there's just some minor adjustments there. Engineering, the reason for that is obviously with the USDA funding. That was something we approved to work with Whiteman and Associates on for pursuing our water projects for, I think it'd be fiscal year 23 at that point. But we hadn't actually budgeted that last December. So we approved it, the council approved for those engineering fees, but we hadn't budgeted for it. So this adjusts that. Again, equipment rental, we had a little bit more equipment rental fees than we had anticipated, and I hope that we've got the budget the budget set for this year. We looked at where we were and tried to make those adjustments for equipment rental. It's good for the motor pool fund, but essentially that's the other thing I guess to keep in mind is that with any of those equipment rental funds, that essentially transfers from that fund over to motor pool. So that one really isn't a loss in funding. It's just going from one fund to another. So keep that in mind as we look at this as well. And then we did offset that partially with reductions in equipment purchase, office supplies, and then capital outlay in the wells department. So across all of these, the total adjustment would be a net increase for the projected budget, for final budget, of $4,950. I think at the end of the day, when you consider that we had COVID as a very real challenge last year, didn't know exactly how we were going to handle some of that. We had fears about whether we were going to see big reductions in tax revenues or how is water bills, how is that going to work. I think we actually came out of this pretty well, and it looks like we're still projecting at this point to add to our fund balances in both the general fund, the sewer fund, and the water fund. So altogether, created some interesting shifts we had to make, but I think altogether this is a rather minor adjustment compared to what it possibly could have been.
Any questions from the council? There is no questions, in the motion to approve the budget amendments as proposed.
make a motion to approve the budget amendments.
Okay, Trustee Gunther, you need a second?
I'll second that.
Trustee Duran, roll call please.
Trustee Benson?
Yes.
Trustee Gunther?
Yes.
Pro Tem Jackson?
Yes.
Trustee Mead?
Yes.
Trustee Pelfrey?
Yes.
Trustee Brand?
Yes.
President Howard?
Yes, all in favor, motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the village manager evaluation.
Yeah, so this one's gonna be a real easy one. I'm gonna give you guys some homework. With the village manager evaluation, what we typically try to do is offer our village council members a chance to be able to take this home with you, really think about it and go through the different items. This should look very similar to one we used in the past. I made a few adjustments just to kind of make it look prettier and clean it up a little bit, but basically the way this works is there's a rating system, 1 being needs significant improvement, 5 meaning I did a bang-up job on something. It goes through different phases, so it'd be administrative skills, representation of the village, leadership, there's a general comment section. What we would ask, or what I'm asking us is that, council, if you need one, I can certainly email a copy to you, or there is one in the packet there, print that out. Go through and, rate the different items there, give me any sort of feedback you can. We do ask in particular if there's a rating of a 1 or a 2 to try to give a comment so that it allows me to understand what wasn't as good as it could have been and how do I make an improvement. The one thing I guess I do want to get across with these for me is that I really appreciate all the feedback you guys give me. Obviously my goal is to serve the community in the best way that I can and to help you guys in your roles as council members. So if there's things I'm doing well, it's good to know that. And by the same token, if there's things that you guys would say, Matt, you really need to do this differently, or we need to see improvements there, it really does a lot in helping me try to determine how can I be better? How can I make things easier for you guys or make things better for the community? So all the feedback you guys are willing to give me is appreciated. What we would do, you can either drop them off to the village here and we'll put them in Ali's box. What we tried to do last year, we didn't quite get there. We'll see how this year works out, but was to potentially have Kim then do kind of a composite where we do like a spreadsheet, for example, and say what were all the scores we saw for this question or this question or this question, and then kind of present an aggregate total. And then at the next month's meeting, so at April's meeting, to have a time set aside for us to actually discuss that. So you guys can then give me direct feedback on, Matt, here's what I thought about this section, or here's something I'd like to see, and have a dialogue as to how we can work towards improvement.
Here's what I'd like to see. I want you put it in my mailbox or you give it to me. I'll leave Kim out of it at this time.
Okay, if you prefer to do that, that's fine as well.
I'll take care of that, so.
Okay. Yeah, so if you want to either bring them
Yeah,
to
just,
Ali,
you
he
can
has a
give it-
mailbox here, we'll just
yeah,
put,
put it in my
you can put it in an
mailbox.
envelope if you want.
Or
I
you
mean,
can give it, just make sure it's an envelope, and sealed envelope, and you can give it to Kim, and Kim will give it to me.
Yeah.
I'll look at it before.
Yeah, and if anybody needs,
That is, before next meeting, I guess.
yeah, that would be helpful. And if you guys want,
Give me a week or so I can.
it isn't hard for me either to make this into like a PDF form where you could just type it out. So if you prefer to do it that way, I can email that out to you guys probably tomorrow, depending on what comes up, but by the end of the week.
And then. Copy.
Okay, Ali likes a hard copy. Fair enough.
That's what I want.
Okay, well, if Ali wants a hard copy, then I guess we'll try to do that. I guess I could still do a PDF and you guys
No,
can
if
print it
somebody
off.
wants a PDF, that's fine.
You
but
can just print it off and bring it up to us or something like that, we'll make it work.
Okay. Any questions? Next item is the parental leave policy.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot in the last few years about things that we can do to retain and attract new staff and the role that benefits plays in that scenario. Obviously, one of the things you can do is just pay higher wages potentially. It's direct impact, and people always like seeing higher income. But one of the challenges I think with that is that those are things where you can't really take it back. So if something changes, you're not normally going to issue pay cuts. And in some ways, certain benefits can actually provide just as much value. We've actually, as we've hired new staff members recently, there's been a couple different times that we've heard feedback from some of them that, I was looking at this place or that place, and actually you guys have a good program for health insurance, or you guys have a good program for this. And so it wasn't necessarily the hourly wage that really drove that, it was some of the other benefits. So, you kind of take a holistic approach and look at all of it, and that makes a big difference. One of the things we haven't really touched on, as far as I can tell looking back, is any sort of a parental leave type program. So a parental leave program, I guess to kind of describe it, would be an option where if an employee sees the birth of a new child, or in the cases of an adoption, this would also apply to that as well. A policy like this would cover a period of initial care or transition for a newborn or adoption. Obviously for transitioning to providing care for a newborn or a new adoption, as well as bonding time, things like that. Increasingly, I think as you look across a lot of private and public entities, there's a lot more that are offering some variations of this. Obviously the idea is to promote families and help parents. So I guess in some respects to kind of encourage people to have families and help them as they start families rather than kind of penalizing them in some cases. So I reached out to the Michigan municipal executives and said, hey, we've been looking at this, what can you guys help me? So I found it was about 2 or 3 different policies that had various different options. So I kind of combined those into a couple different variations here. So there's a policy A, a policy B, and a policy C that I have in front of you guys. And so I guess I'll kind of touch on what they offer and how they would work, and then you guys can debate if any of this looks good. If you could also modify an existing policy if you wanted and say, well, I like policy B, but make it this, something along those lines.
It's like, everybody has these policies, so what we'll discuss, you don't have to go through them all, let's discuss.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to discuss the differences between them.
Hopefully everybody read these policies?
Yeah, so the biggest difference, I guess the couple things to get off the top is that these require a 60-day notice, so somebody can't come in and say, I'm going to be gone next week. I mean, in most cases, you're going to try to plan this out ahead of time. So this gives department heads, myself, a chance to figure out, okay, if somebody's going to be gone, what do we do? FMLA applies in these cases as well. And the way that this would work is that any FMLA eligibility would run concurrently. So you couldn't, for example, have a child and be gone using a parental leave policy and then say, okay, well, at the end of it, I want to add on FMLA as well. It doesn't work that way. This covers the same period as FMLA. It's designed to provide options where there's a benefit to an employee during that time rather than just having a 12-week period of FMLA leave. So you can't, they always would be concurrent. Now, with policy A, some municipalities out there, when I reached out, there were I think about 4 or 5 that said they did 6 weeks as village leave. So basically, the options here are village parental leave, employee leave, matched leave, and then employee paid or unpaid leave. So the idea with village parental leave is that provides a bank of time offered by the village for anybody right off the top. So for example, it would say, okay, here's 2 weeks of time or 4 weeks of time that you get to have off. The employee would continue to receive their normal paycheck at that point for however long that would be. So it's basically paid time off for this case. With matched leave, this would be essentially, or employee leave, I guess, comes before that. There's usually a period with a lot of these where you take an additional time off. So it's like up to a certain time. So it's like, oh, I'm going to take 2 additional weeks on top of that. And then the village could then match that time. So that way it says, well, okay, here's what we're going to give to start with. And then we'll give more time, but you have to take some time off as well. And then usually you're going to run into a gap where there's time at the end. So that would be entirely up to an employee. I guess under policy A, for example, you'd have 4 weeks of time. I didn't go with 6 weeks. I said, no, let's stick with something like 4. I think that's more reasonable. 4 weeks would be paid through the village. If the employee took an additional 2 weeks, the village would match 2 more weeks. That gets you to 8 weeks. The last 4 weeks, if somebody is going to be gone for the full 12, they're entirely up to them. Now, under FMLA, you could take it unpaid. We still have to retain the job, but you could take those 4 weeks off and go unpaid. Or if you have the time saved up, you could use your vacation time, your sick time, anything that's available there, and cover that 4-week period if you have the time available. Now with policy B, what that basically does is shortens that initial parental leave option. So in this case, with policy B, it's 2 weeks of time. And then the matching would kick in and you'd have 2 and 2 potentially, or up to 2 more. So in that example, if an employee used 2 weeks of their own time off, they'd have the option to have 6 weeks of time. and then the remaining 6 weeks is entirely up to them. And then option C was basically no time offered from the village up front at all. It was entirely matching based. So if you take 3 weeks, we'll match 3 weeks. If you take 4 weeks, we'll match 4 weeks. You know, I think, like I said, a lot of places are somewhere in between A and B from what I've seen. I thought 4 weeks for policy A was probably about where we go on the upper end. If you guys, I mean, of course, somebody could change it to 6 if you wanted to, but you know, I think there's a couple different options here that would potentially work if the council wants to see a benefit like this added.
So the 12 weeks you're talking about, you're basically including the FMLA policy in there. So
Yes.
you can be off for up to 12 weeks. FMLA,
Yes.
and then the parental leave will run concurrently with that,
Yes.
and your choice starts at, we pay 4 weeks, and I'm thinking that we should pay 6.
Okay.
I think all these, in my opinion, what I see, they already pay 6 weeks in a way. If you know
Yeah.
that. That's what they do, just in a different format.
Most of them do.
It's
I
a
mean,
different
I just
format.
wasn't sure. I guess I didn't
this-
want
this
to. I didn't
pays-
want to aim too high.
What
I guess.
But I'm gonna let the council talk first, then I'll have my opinion on that. So
Sure.
I will listen from the.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing I'll touch on real quick, and it would apply with all of these, is that it requires you to submit that notice in writing, but then at that point, you're detailing exactly what time you're planning at that point. So the idea is that by something like this, with FMLA, it can kick in, and they don't have an obligation to tell us, well, I'm only going to be gone 8 weeks, or I'm going to be gone 10. It makes it really difficult for us to be able to know exactly what this is. With this, the idea is you do specify in advance, this is how long I'm going to be gone, and this is what I'm doing. It gives Kim and I a chance to review it and make sure, okay, that we've got everything squared away for the leave time. Yep, you have the time off available for what you're proposing here, et cetera. And then we have an idea on the village side, how long is somebody going to be gone?
It's just.
Well, and I also think for that 6 weeks, as long as you take it in work week increments,
Mhm.
I think you could split that 6 weeks up. So, for example, in your case, when your wife has her twins,
Yes.
maybe you want to take that first 4 weeks and then get back to work, and then maybe when they're 6 months old and having doctor's appointments and things like that, maybe you want to take the next 2 weeks and, to finalize your last 6 weeks
Yeah,
total.
there could be options there too. I mean, this was just kind of a starting point, I guess, to see.
So to me, it would make sense for the 12-week FMLA we're currently with, we'll pay the 6 weeks. As long as you take them in full week increments, you can take that 6 weeks whenever it works out best for you. Has to
Okay.
be taken though in that first year, so you
Taken
can't drag it
first
out.
year. Yeah, and I think the other thing that with all these policies do is that it makes it pretty clear that it's only usable for that purpose. You can't say, well,
You don't get it twice.
I took
if you have
6.
twins.
I had 6 in here, and I only took 4, so I want the 2 in cat. There's no payout or anything
Yeah.
like that. So I mean, that would be one thing you could do, and I think it would get around some of this. Is you could do like a 6-week parental leave like that, and then just not do anything matching at all. Just say 6 weeks is on the village. The rest you do whatever you want to do.
Any other questions, council members?
I think the FMLA is in 6-month increments, isn't it?
No.
FMLA works 2 ways. You can take incremental, so like if you suffer migraines, you can take, every time you have a migraine, as long as you're approved for FMLA, you can take a day off.
Yeah.
And then it just accrues over the time frame until you've used up your.
I believe it's 12 weeks
It's
in
12
any
weeks,
18.
12 weeks per 6 months, I thought.
No, it's-
No, for the whole year.
12 weeks per year.
Yeah, it's a federal
Yep.
law.
And then the other thing with this policy too is that it does have some safeguards in here that I believe it would require somebody to have worked for the village.
18 months.
I believe it was 18 months. So that way, it can't be something that somebody starts right away and then is gone right then. I think there has to be a buildup of time there as well.
First of all, I'm going to let you right now, I want to simplify this mess.
Okay.
It's really messy. It's very simple, the village will pay 6, in my opinion, they will pay the 6 weeks.
Okay.
What Charlene says, you could split them up like, she mentioned like sometimes, you can split them when you could have a doctor appointments at some different times. But the village will pay 6 weeks, and if you wanna finish it, take 12, that's gonna be on you and on the employee, like
Sure.
whoever wants, the 12 weeks.
Yeah, and
So the village will pay the 6 weeks, in my opinion, and make it very simple. There is 2 sentences there, should be like 2 paragraphs. And you could clean this up.
yeah, I mean, we certainly can adopt that
So
policy.
Village 6 weeks, and then.
It makes it a lot easier to implement when it's just that as well.
I don't like all this A, B, C, 2 weeks here. I don't like it. Maybe other council members like it.
No, and I think the idea with that was, in some places, what some communities did, and and I think some extended additional time beyond 6 weeks, or in some cases, they wanted to see some sort of a matching incentive. So that's where some of this came into play. I think actually, if you just simplify it and say 6 weeks of parental leave, period, that's actually a much easier way to deal with it.
You could still have 18 months employment.
Yep, still have it run concurrently with FMLA, still have all of those sorts of calculations, but.
And if you wanna take 8 weeks off, okay, as long as you're approved for it, it's just that other 2 weeks, you're using your vacation time or.
Yes, yes,
sick time or
exactly,
whatever.
exactly, that's the idea, yeah.
I think maybe you need to clean that up, and you wanna bring it next month, or how you wanna do this.
Yeah.
Clean this up, clean the 6 weeks, and,
I think you could get it to 1 page.
yeah, half a page, it should be good too.
Yes.
I'll say a page.
I think I can get it trimmed down. Well, actually, a lot of this is these examples of how it would work. I'll remove those, so it's not.
Let me ask you this, your case with the village manager.
Yes,
And we may need you here sometime.
yes.
I don't know, I'm asking council, is it possible maybe, sometimes, you could have the 6 weeks, whatever, but maybe you will come in one day.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I do know.
That day you come in, for example, or 2, whatever, then you could still
Yes.
take them another time.
Yes, of course,
Within that year.
obviously, as
If you
mentioned,
got for 6 weeks.
I will be having twins this fall, but I am not planning on just saying, all right, guys, bye-bye, have fun. My plan was, I wasn't gonna take any more than 6 weeks, period. But to still be available. So if Chief calls and needs something, or if Kim needs help with something that, obviously we have the ability to work from home, I don't have an issue with that, or be able to come in for a day if
I
necessary.
don't want you to do that personally. What I want you to do is, when you are gone, you take care of your family. At the same time, if you leave a day or 2 to come here where they need you,
Yeah.
you could do that, but you don't have to worry about.
No, and that would be simple, is to say, hey, here's these 2 weeks, and then I'll be here this Monday and Tuesday, and then, that wouldn't be hard at all.
Okay.
I give you a week with twins, and you're gonna be going, I'm going back to work.
That could be.
Exactly.
It was quite a surprise, I'll say that.
Okay.
Let me know, I can call you.
but- Hey, Jimmy, I need you to call me.
Any questions from the council? Do you think that's doable?
I think if he comes back with it.
Okay, I'll rework it and bring it back next month.
Yeah, just, I could look at it if you want me to, or have one of the council members look at it.
Yeah, if you guys, if anybody wants this, here's what I think I'll do, is I'll come up with a draft.
And send it to us.
Send it out to you guys, you guys can let me know what you think.
Yeah.
And then we'll have an official vote on it come the April meeting.
That's good. If somebody has any comments, then you could always comment.
Absolutely, yeah, if you've got, certainly email me, stop by, give me a call, whatever's easiest.
The next item on the agenda is the public comments. Any comments from the public?
As somebody who just had kids a couple of years ago, I would kill for a policy like this, so
No kidding.
kudos to you all. It would have been really nice to have that paid time, and I saved the time working at SMC to take the time off, but it would have been really nice to have that as a benefit.
Okay, no public comments. Council comments. Mr. Varela, have anything?
Thank you to you guys, took care of us in the heavy snow.
Mr. Thank you there.
Nothing here.
Yeah.
I just want to thank Matt and Jimmy both, because you guys heard me harp about that sidewalk over there until you cleaned it up.
We got it done.
Thank you.
And we talked to the owner, and I don't think we're gonna have that problem again.
Trustee Benson, have anything?
Nope.
Okay, the only comment, I don't have any comment, but there was one question for you, man.
Sure.
When are you gonna hire the part-time person, individual for the first front office?
For the office?
Yeah.
We are probably gonna look to try to get that done early in the year here. I guess I don't wanna get too into the details of this right offhand, but we have a couple, employees where there are some work restrictions that we have to deal with right now. So we're actually gonna be having them come into the office. It'd probably be about 20 hours a week for a few weeks. I think we'll probably utilize that help to kind of help us with some projects here in the office, and then look to do the hiring after that is over. I think if we tried to hire at this point now and then bring somebody in there and have 3 people extra in the office here, then we get help again. But I would think we're gonna try to.
You manage it the way you want to manage it.
Yeah, so I mean, we're
going
gonna actually have help in the office right away,
Okay.
but I would think we were shooting sometime early this spring, so that we can get somebody in, start getting them trained, and see kind of all of the different processes, because annually things change from month to month, so the earlier we get somebody started in the fiscal year, kind of the better it is for them to be able to see all of the different phases of things that we do.
I just want to see like deputy clerk, whatever you want, somebody to
Yes,
learn the
yes.
budget, learn the finance, what some of the Kim does.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea, is to look at hiring,
Both,
kind of a deputy clerk type of a
yeah,
role, where
yeah.
they're gonna learn what Evelyn does, but also learn a little bit of what Kim does, so that we can have kind of a backup, option there.
Okay. The last thing in the agenda is, I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll make a motion.
Trustee Mead, I need a second.
Second.
Trustee Varela, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No motion carries.